Siemanko, z tej strony Piotrek. Parę ostatnich dni spędziłem w Los Angeles, gdzie miałem okazję pograć w POE Exile 2, porozmawiać z wieloma devami, porozmawiać z innymi graczami i nagrać w zasadzie wszystko. Niedługo pojawi się masa materiałów, a na razie macie taki pierwszy, malutki wywiad z Octavianem. Octavian jest ciekawym gościem. Jest to gość, który kiedyś po prostu był streamerem POE Exile oraz współprowadzącym jednego z ciekawszych podcastów o POE Exile. I to nie będzie wywiad akurat, w którym pojawi się pytanie o język polski. To jest wywiad, w którym pytam Octaviana faktycznie o rzeczy, którymi się zajmuje i gdzie może dać ciekawą odpowiedź. Sam Octavian jest super gościem, miałem okazję pogadać z nim o wielu decyzjach designowych, jedynki, dwójki, jeszcze poza wywiadem. Chętnie nagram o tym film, a teraz trzymajcie moją rozmowę. Enjoy. You're doing testing and design, so what element of your work you're the most excited for the general public to see in POE 2?
Testing covers a lot of things, but most of it relatively indirectly. Probably the boss fights. I don't want to like overstate my hand in them. You know, I'm not one of the monster designers, but they're just my favorite element of the game in general. Like the bosses in POE 2 are pretty darn great for the most part.
Yeah, I actually played through the I don't know how far I actually got in the second act, but probably quite far. And they already keep getting better and better. Do you have like a best boss fight, not the best boss fight, but like your favorite one that you kind of want to hype up a little?
It's an interesting question. My favorite boss out of all the like big exciting ones is probably the Baron, which is the boss of Act 1. He is challenging without ever feeling like BS.
I'm sorry, by Baron you mean the Iron Count?
The Iron Count, yes.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Baron is the internal name. The Iron
okay.
Count. Yeah, so he's certainly not a pushover. He's a challenge, but none of his abilities individually feel cheap at any point. And I'm not saying like that's a common thing with the bosses in POE 2, but it is surprisingly hard to do that. It's a really difficult balance to strike between like making something not a pushover, but also never feel like crap.
How often did you actually have to give feedback that the ability has to be cut from a boss? Because, you know, it's...
Cutting something is a pretty drastic last-minute measure. It certainly has happened. You know, there's a couple Act 4 bosses where things got rearranged or cut quite a bit. But usually you try and do something transformative if there is an ability that just feels like, you know, this is just not fun, which happens sometimes. You know, your first draft of an idea is not always perfect. But usually if there's an idea that's like, you know, it'd be cool if the boss did this, and then you put it in game and it's not very fun, usually you can still take 80% of that idea, change a little bit, and now it is fun and interesting and something that the boss should be doing.
Actually, I asked this question because at the beginning of the show, I believe Jonathan said that 3 of the abilities of the boss shown weren't used. Were they scrapped or were not ready?
No, my guess is that it's an AI issue for the boss. The AI files, or AI in general, is a lot harder to get right when you introduce minions into the equation, because suddenly you have to have specific, so things can have weightings for like how far away someone is, or what abilities the monster just used, or what direction you're standing from the monster. And all of those certain things get a lot more complicated if there's 20 targets instead of 1 or even 2. So it's likely just that the AI is not quite perfect for the presence of, you know, another player, as well as 12 or 13 minions, however many I had in that demo.
Kind of makes sense because it looked like it was a little too easy to run around it, so which I suppose is contracted by the actual abilities. So that's an easy question now. What's your favorite class and why? Just shortly.
Monk is definitely my favorite of the ones that we showed today, or that we had available to play today. Huntress might be my favorite overall, but Monk is... Basically, I like the classes where they have like those combo abilities. So like Huntress has a rapid spear attack where the final hit does way more damage if you commit to it. And Monk has things like that too. Ice Strike, the third hit does bonus damage and has bigger AoE. Tempest Flurry, the last hit has big AoE and does extra shock, all that sort of thing. I find it really satisfying to space correctly to be able to pull that off.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I actually liked it a lot as well. So this is, you can answer very vaguely. I'm just, you know, because I know you cannot answer, but like a vague hint that doesn't really tell anything is okay. A hint on some cool ascendancy.
There will be ascendancies.
Okay, that's very vague. That's very vague. All right.
One of the monk ascendancies, actually I can't.
It's cool.
They're all cool.
All right.
We have a lot of cool ideas, some of which are functional and testable, and some of which are still very much concepts. So it's going to take a bit of work, but we'll get there. And it's also a lot more ascendancies because there's just more classes.
Okay, so that's a follow-up to that question then. Is there some cool concept that's scrapped that you're kind of really sad about, that seemed amazing in theory, at least?
I mean, a lot of stuff gets scrapped or changed or edited just because, there's some overarching change that happens to a system that then rattles onto another system that means it has to change in some other way. I'm trying to think of a specific example, though. It's not truly scrapped, but so one of the goals for the game is to have a boss in every single area, at least one, some places multiple. And yeah, there's, I don't know how far into Act 2 you got. Did you get to the bone pits, the sort of black sand area?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I killed the, well, I don't remember his name, so it's hard to tell.
Fine.
But yeah, one of blood mages or whatever.
Okay, that describes a few things potentially.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There's a lot of blood in our video game. But yeah, so there is a giant sort of brutish boss that is meant to be in that area, but has not been in any of the demos yet because it's just been a challenge to get everything right. So I don't know about fully scrapped, but yeah, there's stuff that's just kind of waiting in the wings in limbo that I really hope we get to show players soon.
Yeah, although I can probably imagine that you had like a lot of Scion ideas, for example, that seemed really cool, but you just couldn't make it.
Scion is a tough one, especially with how many other classes we're adding, and those are all going to need their ascendancies and stuff. Like, if you have, well, how many classes are we going to end up with? If there's 2 options per class, and there's, so if you have,
36.
I might be doing the math wrong. I might be doing the math wrong, but if you have, what is it, like 14, 12 base classes? Please don't quote me on this. Math in my head after a full day of work is hard. But if you have that many base classes and you need 3 ascendancies for each, that is probably somewhere in the range of 30 to 40 ascendancies. How do you make Scion work with that?
Yeah.
Like, it just becomes an untenable concept at that point.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Although, yeah, I guess you had some internal ideas, but we already talked a little about it, but I think it's such an interesting subject that I would like to ask you on camera. Because like I organize hardcore leagues in Polish community. They're kind of popular. Like the last one had like over 1,300 players.
Dang, yeah, that is quite good.
So I'm really excited about popularizing the hardcore idea, but it's one of my fears that hardcore is gonna become too niche with Path of Exile 2. How do you approach, because you were, I'm not sure how you feel about it now, but in the past I know you've been a hardcore player for years. How do you personally feel about it?
A few points on that, I guess. I mean, first off, like the way that we design the game is try and make Path of Exile 2 the best it can be, however that happens to be first, and then hardcore can exist as a side. Like, hardcore is not something that we like design for. I'm trying to say this in a way that's diplomatic because I don't want to just sound like, screw you guys, we don't like you. But it's like, we're not designing the game to be a hardcore video game. We're designing the game to be a very good video game. And if that means that bosses need to be more challenging and punishing and interesting in order to make it a really good video game, then that just makes hardcore harder, which, this, to my second point, is kind of fine by me because it means that like actually getting through the story on hardcore might be something of an accomplishment. Like, you can brag about that, and that is cool. Because like, you can brag about that in POE 1, and certainly for a newer player that would be an accomplishment. But there's a point at which, for an experienced hardcore player, getting through the story on a new character is, almost autopilot. And that I have tested and played POE 2 quite a bit. I would not say I can do hardcore on autopilot yet.
But you've done it, as in the whole campaign?
I mean, hardcore functionality is something that we do occasionally test because sometimes there's regressions and things break. Actually, before this demo, we tested whether hardcore characters worked, and you just couldn't make one for some reason. That was sorted by our back-end guys. So yeah, I do occasionally play hardcore on testing. Usually when testing, though, I'm playing while cheating,
Oh, yeah.
in order to, create the exact situation where the thing breaks in the exact wrong way. It's much easier to do that if I can warp and go God mode and all that
I
sort of
can
thing.
imagine, especially with the game changing so much. I got to talk some players that attended previous playtests, and
Yep.
they all keep on saying that it changes completely. Like the feel of the game changes completely between versions. In the game promotion, you've used a lot of archetypes recently, so it's easy to get to get it tied in your mind that a certain character does a certain thing. But as we know, you can use different gems and different equipment.
Yeah, you definitely
So,
still can. Yeah.
Can you kind of give an idea of a cool build that you played internally or seen internally that makes good use of comboing certain unobvious decisions?
Well, actually, something that stood out to me here from watching one of the people at the demo was exactly how good using the mercenaries rapid fire crossbow is with the Tempest Bell from Monk. Because Tempest Bell does not have an internal cooldown beyond that of a server tick, so it can technically trigger every single tick. And rapid fire crossbow bolts will hit faster than anything else at that level. So in theory, you could do that on one character. Like you could have a monk get up the stacks to place a Tempest Bell, weapon swap, and just and ring your bell like 5 times in a second. Which, yeah, that sounds kind of cool.
Yeah,
I can go a bit more into depth and details. So
Yeah,
Tempest
sure.
Bell is a skill which, it's a monk skill, a quarterstaff skill, which when you hit with 4 strikes, you can then place a giant bell, like bigger than the character, on the ground in the world. And then when you hit that bell, it will ring and do damage in an area around it. And you can hit it with anything. So you build up the stacks, place the bell, swap to a rapid fire crossbow, and rapid fire it.
An explosion happens.
Yes.
Well, that concludes it. I hope well it all goes well. Because actually, yeah, how do you feel about actually showing it to even more people now?
I think it went pretty well. There were no crashes on the live demo, which is always a plus. I didn't die during the live demo, and we had minimal bugs and stuff here. I mean, there's always some that slip through, but for the most part, people were able to progress fine. You know, I think there was like 1 or 2 people that had actual progression blocking bugs, which, you know, compared to the last event is certainly an improvement, and hopefully we can just keep on improving from there.
Perfect. I wish you best of luck.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That concludes it.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah, perfect.